the topic of the shiur today is, as I said, the Purim Hameshulash. Yeah, Purim Hameshulash. Second. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. So good morning. We'll start the shiur. We're talking about what happens when Shushan Purim is on Shabbos. That's what we're gonna experience. Actually, all of us um, next week. Yes, next week, next Shabbat is Tetvav Adar, meaning Purim, Yudalet Adar, is on Friday, and Purim, in terms of the date, falls on Shabbos. Now, the term was coined Purim HaMeshulash, or Purim Meshulash, and that is, as we'll see, because the Shulchan Aruch rules that the laws of Purim are splitting between 3 days. Friday, I talk about the Jerusalem people. The people out of Jerusalem, most of the world, it's very simple. They just do Purim on Friday, full Purim on Friday. They read the Megillah Thursday night, and they, during the day of Friday, they're reading Megillah, giving Shalach Manos, giving Matanot Levionim, and doing their Seudah. There is, of course, a discussion that we, the Jerusalem people, discussed in 2 years ago and some other years ago. What happens when Purim is on Friday in terms of the Seudah, since we don't want to eat right before Shabbat, a big meal. So we need to start it before Chatzos, or at least before the Mincha time. There's all, this is the discussion. But I'm here in Jerusalem with the snow, and I'm dealing with the people of Jerusalem. So what is, next week we'll have something pretty unique that happens from time to time, that actually Shushan Purim is, in terms of the date, is on Shabbos. And here, it's called Purim Meshulash because of a split of the laws. We see that the mitzvot of Purim are split between Friday, Shabbos, and Sunday. The analytic question that I'll present at first, and then we will see the sources, is when I say Purim Meshulash, do I say it in a strong sense or in a less strong sense? Let me explain. Do I mean really that Purim is split? Purim HaMeshulash. Purim is split on 3 days in terms of the identity of the days. Each day has a certain identity of Purim. Or that really Purim is in 1 day, it's on Shabbos. Only when technically I can't do some mitzvot, then they're moved either forward or either they're postponed or they're made earlier. But that is one question. Possible ramification is the big machlokit between the poskim. If you will see here at the end of it, I'm now scrolling the sources. There is a famous Shulchan Aruch saying, Kol divrei hagvulut nogim b'Chanukah u'Purim. He's talking now about regular years. Avelus, Shulchan Aruch claims, someone is sitting Shiva. He has a normal Shiva in Chanukah and Purim. Chanukah and Purim are merely rabbinic, therefore there is an Avelus. The Rama says, however, mikol makom yelech lebet hakneset lishmoa Megillah, v'muchal le'esof minyan lebeito likroa Megillah. But here is the critical sentence by the Rama. Yesh omrim she'ein avelut noheg bepurim lo b'yudalet v'lo b'tetvav v'chen nohagin. He says, some say that there's no avelut, no conduct of avelut, neither in 14th or in the 15th, and this is our minhag. And then he adds, afilu avelut yom rishon nidcha mipnei Purim. Even what seems to be a doraita avelut of first day, is postponed, is waived because of Purim. However, dvarim shebatzina noheg, like Shabbos. Okay. Now, the question will be, Sunday this year is Tetzayin, and yet still, as we'll see, according to most poskim, we're doing the Suda Purim on Sunday. So will there be Avelus? How do I see that? Do I see it as a real Purim, or just that because there was some problem, as we'll see, to do the Suda, we're doing the Suda, but Tachlis, there is a Velut, at least when you're not doing the Suda. The rabbis of Jerusalem had machloikis about it. Just to share with you some views, Rav Auerbach says that there is no Avelus at all. Rav Elyashiv says that there is Avelus. So it's very, very interesting. Well, I'll return to this question. I just used it as a benchmark, as a sign regarding the identity of, let's say, Sunday, whether it's a partial Purim or it's not a partial Purim. Now let's go to the sources. Megillah Lamed Amud Aleph, Itmar. Okay, there is a Gemara in Megillah Daf Lamed, Itmar. Purim shechal liot be'erev Shabbos. Purim that happens to be on Erev Shabbos, like our year, yeah, that Yudaled, the 14th, is on Friday. Rav Amar Makdimin Parashat Zachor, as we actually do, meaning that you read Parashat Zachor a week before, in the Shabbos that is before, that Purim. And Shmuel says Me'achrin, yeah, Shmuel says, no, we read Zachor when? Next Shabbos, in Parshat Tetzaveh, meaning. And we know that we're ruling like Rav. We will, today's Thursday, in 2 days from now, we'll read Parshat Zachor. So we're doing like Rav, but Shmuel is saying no. Shmuel is saying that we should read Parshat Zachor next Shabbat. When? In Tetvav. And he says that should be the case also in Rehovot and Tel Aviv. Everywhere this year should read Zachor in Tetvav. Let's see the logic of the opinions. Rav Amar Makdimin. Rav says we are reading Zachor before Yudaled and Tetvav, in the Shabbos before Yudaled and Tetvav. So that there won't be a situation that you are practicing the Purim before the commemoration. The Zachor is the commemoration, yeah, the recitation. And Purim is an actual doing the days. Yeah, it's written in the Megillah. That's what Rav and Shmuel are referring to, even though they're not mentioning it. Rav and Shmuel are referring to the verse in the Megillah, V'hayamim ha'ele nizkarim v'na'asim. Yeah, that's how it says. V'hayamim ha'ele nizkarim v'na'asim. It says these days of Purim are commemorated and are practiced. So what do we learn from here? That since it says nizkarin v'na'asim, that the commemoration should be before the practice. That's what we learned from the verse in the Megillah. The commemoration should be before the practice. That's why every year we read Zachor, the commemoration, prior to the practice of Purim. Suda, all the mitzvos of the day, Shachmanos, Matanot Levyonim, all the mitzvos of the day are practiced in Purim. Zachor is always a Shabbos before that. Why? Because of this verse, Nizkarin v'nasim. Now, what the sages, Rav and Shmuel here are arguing about is the following. In such a year that Yudalet is on Friday and the 15th is on Shabbos, when will we read Zachor? So Rav says no, as we do every year, because if you'll read it on Shabbos, let's say you'll be in Rehovot, and you'll read it on Shabbos, then actually you did the commemoration after the practice, because you celebrated Purim on Friday. Yeah, everyone outside of Jerusalem is doing full Purim on Friday. Okay, so if you're doing full Purim on Friday and you'll read Zachor on Shabbos, then actually you will reverse the order. You will first do and then commemorate. That's why Rav says, no way, you have to read Zachor this coming Shabbat before the 14th. So Rav Amar Makdimin, Ge'echi delo tikdom, so that we will prevent a situation that the practice will be prior to the commemoration. Ushmuel Amar Me'acharin. Shmuel said we should postpone, and we should actually do this year read Zachor everywhere next Shabbat. Amar Lach. What is he saying? Kevan de ikamukafin de avdi bechamesar, since there are the surrounded cities, i.e. Jerusalem, that are practicing Purim in the 15th, then asiyah uschira behade hadade katan. So here, what you have is that the practice and the commemoration will be done together, and that is fine. Okay. So what will Rav answer Shmuel? Yeah, Shmuel says, I don't have a problem of making the practice before the commemoration, because in the surrounded city, Jerusalem, actually, I celebrate Purim on Shabbos. So actually, I didn't early the commemoration to the practice. It just every year, it's before the commemoration. Today, this year, it's together. You read Zachor on Shabbos. You do Purim on Shabbos. So Nizkarin v'Nasim, they're done together. Okay. So here we have several questions. What would you think Rav will answer Shmuel? Yeah, what will be Rav's answer to Shmuel in your eyes? So, first, I think what's very clear here.
What about Rehovot?
What?
What about Rehovot?
Exactly. Meaning the question is, how come Shmuel, because of the surrounded cities, so actually, Tachlis, the majority of the Jews will have the problem of Rav, that the commemoration is done after the practice. All right. That's a simple claim that Rav can claim towards Shmuel, meaning Rav says, I'm following the majority of the people, and Shmuel seems to ignore the majority of the people. So actually, yeah, that's the reality. It's true. Shmuel says, it's enough that I have the Jerusalem people. It's enough that I have the Jerusalem people doing Purim on Shabbos, that all Am Yisrael, it's already considered that's commemoration and practice are done together. That's one claim. Now here, I think that is unfolding and revealing a very, very important chakira that I want to keep in our mind. How do I really see every year this split between Shushan Purim and Purim? Do I really say, okay, since all the cities outside of Shushan were resting on Yudalid, and Shushan were fighting on Yudalid, and resting on Tetzvav, so I really say that Purim for everyone is Yudalid, and Purim for the Jerusalem people is Tetzvav. But it's two, for each one has its own holiday period. That is one view. Or I say the following, the Megillah calls it Yemei HaPurim Ha'eleh, the days of Purim. So perhaps both of these days are considered Yemei HaPurim, meaning it's like a long Purim. Only the law was established that the people outside of Jerusalem are making their practices on the 14th, and the people of Jerusalem are doing their practice, all the laws of Purim on the 15th. But actually, as it says in the Gemara, as you know, do we say Tachnun on Yudalid, even if we're Jerusalem people? I'm talking every year, in regular years, and also in this year. I'm a Jerusalem person. In the 14th, do I say Tachnun? The answer is no. A person outside of Jerusalem, he already celebrated all Purim in the 14th. We don't say Al Anisim. We don't say Al Anisim, each one in the other day. But there are discussions, and that could be related to our discussion here. If someone inadvertently saying Al Anisim, do we stop him? Yeah, if a Jerusalem person says Al Anisim in a 14th, do we stop him? And there are discussions about between the poskim about it that could be related to our case. But at any rate, we're seeing that we're not saying Tachunun or Hesped in the other day. That's one thing. Furthermore, we saw the Ramah. The opening source of this year was the Ramah that said that there is no Avelut, both on Yudalad and Tetvav. And the answer, and the question is why? If I'm a Jerusalem person, why shouldn't I have Avelut in the 14th? Or if I'm a outside of Jerusalem person that already celebrated my Purim and now I'm not celebrating my Purim in the 15th, why is there no Avelut in the 15th? So Rav Soloveitchik explains, based on these sources, that the concept is it's like a long day, a Yom HaArichta, meaning really it's Yemei HaPurim, it's Purim for all of us, these 2 days. Only it was established and decreed that all the laws of Purim will be done by the people in Jerusalem in the outside of Jerusalem in the 14th. All the laws of Jerusalem of Purim will be done by the Jerusalem people in the 15th. Fantastic. Now, if I hold this view, that actually it's Yemei HaPurim, it's like a long unit of 14th and 15th in terms of identity, even if not practicality. Ramification, as I said, not saying Tachnun on both days. Ramification, what the Ramah says, that there are no Avelus in both days, no matter where you live. If I say this thing, then I can understand Shmuel's opinion. Perhaps that's the machlokas between Rav and Shmuel. As here again, we'll share the screen. The question was, when do I read Zachor? Rav says, I can't read Zachor next Shabbat because then all the outside of Jerusalem people will do the practice before the commemoration. And Shmuel says, no, it's not a problem because the people of Jerusalem will actually do the practice and the commemoration together. So here you see clearly that Shmuel probably assumes our Chiddush, that actually even for the people that are outside of Jerusalem, the 15th has a meaning. And therefore, since the 15th has a meaning, so even though they did all their mitzvos on Friday, but yet it's still the very fact that the Jerusalem people are doing their practice on the 15th is an indicator that actually the 15th is the day of doing, and therefore it's still considered Asiyah V'Zchira, meaning the doing of the 15th already of the people in Jerusalem counts also for the people outside of Jerusalem, so that it's not considered that they preceded the commemoration to the practice, because Am Yisrael is still practicing. Since Am Yisrael is still practicing, so Asiyah V'Zchira together are coming. They're done together. And the 15th has a meaning to the people outside of Jerusalem, even though they're not doing anything. So that is one thing. I think that this Machloket A reveals this conceptual question, or might reveal the conceptual question about how do I see every year round this split between the 14th and the 15th? It's two separate holidays, or do I see that everyone, both people in Jerusalem and outside of Jerusalem, they have Yemei HaPurim, only the practice is focused for one in the 14th and for one in the 15th. The second important premise and thing that we derive from this Gemara that is very relevant to our topic is that you see clearly that the Gemara holds, and here Rav doesn't argue with Shmuel about this point, that Mukafin are doing in the 15th, even when the 15th is on Shabbos, meaning clearly that this Gemara regards the Purim of the Jerusalem people when Shushan Purim is on Shabbos, which is the topic of this Gemara. Shushan Purim is in Erev Shabbos, so meaning Shushan Purim is on Shabbos, and it says Mukafin Avdei B'Chameisar. The Mu'ing are practicing the Purim in the Chameisar. So that's a clear statement that the Mukafin are doing their holiday this year. Jerusalem people like us are doing their holiday this year in the 15th. Now let's see the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Chaliyot Erev Shabbos. That's the Mishnah in the beginning of the Masechet. If Purim happened to be on Friday, then Kfarim Makdimin Liyom HaKnisa, the little villages, they're earlying their Megillah reading to Thursday, meaning they're reading it in Yud Gimel. That's a separate thing that we won't deal with. There is a general law, that's the first Mishnah in Megillah, that little villages, for some reasons, they were reading the Megillah even before Purim, either in Yud Bet Nisan or Yud Gimel Nisan. They were earlying it to Mondays and Thursdays. So if Purim is on Friday, so the little villages are allowed to read the Megillah, or should read the Megillah even earlier than Purim, meaning on Thursday. Ve'ayarot gdolot, and big towns that are not surrounded by walls. U'makafot choma, but also the ones that are surrounded by the walls, like Jerusalem, korin bo bayom, meaning on Friday. So here's the first explicit law that we see. What do we see from here till now? The first Gemara in page 30, Megillah Lamed, taught us that there is a Purim for the people of Jerusalem in the 15th. That is the Purim, Avdei Bechamisa. However, the first Mishnah in the Masechet says clearly that we don't read the Megillah on Shabbos. That's what it implies, at least. It says that we read the Megillah in the 14th, in Friday. Here you see, Mukaf Ayarot Gdolot, that's the only case where Ayarot Gdolot Mukafot Choma Korin Bo Bayom. They read it on Friday. So how the question is, of course, why don't we read the Megillah on Shabbos? Especially that it was said that it's not said that the day was uprooted from Shabbos, and this year we do the entire Purim on Friday. This we saw clearly that it's not that way in the previous source, because it says that the Mukafin are doing the Purim in the 15th. So why do we read the Megillah on a Friday? Why is it said here that Mukafot Choma Korim Bo Bayom, meaning that we read it on Friday in the 14th? I'll just make a little pause. And mention the fact that this year, that's what I'm saying to my congregants. Yeah, give me a reason, to move from outside of Jerusalem to Jerusalem. What are the reasons to move to Jerusalem? So I assume all of you are holy people, and we'll just say the reason why we decided to live in Jerusalem is because that's the holy city. And if we have an opportunity to do Aliyah, why live in Ra'anana? Let's live in Jerusalem. If we already did Aliyah. Well, that's a very serious answer. But there's a much more practical answer. I don't like reading the Megillah starving. Now, as a kid who grew up in Rehovot, every year you read the Megillah when you starve, because you read it right after Tanis Esther. Okay? And Jerusalem people don't know this experience. Think about it. All the time that you were abroad, you read the Megillah with empty stomach at night. But once you move to Jerusalem, hooray! End of this. You finish the Tanis Esther, go to have your meal. Only the next night, when you're very, very satisfied, you could read the Megillah. Well, this is a good reason for each year. This year, out of solidarity of our brothers outside of Jerusalem, this year we'll all read the Megillah on an empty stomach next Thursday night. Yeah, a week from today, in the evening, a week from today will be Tanis Esther. And at that night, all Am Yisrael will read the Megillah. Not only the people outside of Jerusalem. Yeah, but Larry, we're not talking about that. I'm just saying reading the Megillah. Yeah, this year, Tanis Esther, the date of Tanis Esther is on Thursday. And we're reading the Megillah on empty stomach. Not only the people outside of Jerusalem, but also the Jerusalem people, as we just read in the Mishnah, that the Jerusalem people are reading the Megillah on Friday, meaning halach l'maaseh. That's how that's what the Mishnah says, and that's what the Shulchan Aruch rules halach l'maaseh. He said Purim Hameshulash. So we saw that for some that even though the date of Purim for us Jerusalem people will be next Shabbat, but the Megillah reading will be on Friday, like everyone. So we read it Thursday night on empty stomach, also the Jerusalem people. So this year, we don't have any advantage in that sense over the people outside of Jerusalem. Now, why is that, as I asked? Why do we read the Megillah? Why can't we read the Megillah on Shabbos? As we've seen, the Gemara says that Avdei B'Chamesar, that we do the Purim in the 15th. So why aren't we reading the Megillah on Friday, on Shabbos? So the Gemara says, the Kuli Alma Mia Megillah B'Shabbat Lo Karinem. Everyone concedes that the Megillah on Shabbos we don't read. Why? My taima. Amar Rabba, Hakol Chayavim B'Kriyat Megillah U'V'Tkiyat Shofar, Ve'en Hakol B'Kiyim B'Kriyas Megillah. Zeh Hashem Eitlena Beyado V'Yelech Etzel B'Ki L'Lmod Ve'Arvirna Arba'amot B'Rshut Harabim. V'Ainu taima de Shofar, V'Ainu taima de Lulav. Meaning, why aren't we blowing the shofar when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos? There is a rabbinic concern, even though it's a Doraita law to blow the shofar in the first day of Tishrei, but if the first day of Tishrei falls on Shabbos, then we will not blow the shofar on Shabbos, and that is because we're concerned that someone will not know how to blow the shofar, and he will carry it 4 amos in Reshus Harabim, by that transgress the laws of Shabbos, of Hotzah, of Tiltul. He will, without an Arab, carry the shofar 4 amos, and therefore we're because of this concern, we're not blowing the shofar. And the rabbis have the power to tell you to refrain from doing a positive commandment with your right of blowing the shofar in order to prevent, because of the decree, that it might happen that you will travel in the public domain for 4 amos. And this is the same reason for the lulav, why when Sukkot falls in the first day is on Shabbos, when Sukkot is on Shabbos, then even if it's not that, when Sukkot is on Shabbos, we don't take the lulav when Sukkot is on Shabbos. And the fourth, and the other example is Megillah. So there is a law to read Megillah established by the prophets. Yeah, this is Takanat Nevi'im, Divrei Kabbalah. It's not the Oraita and it's not the Rabbanan. Yeah, it's something in between, the status of Megillah reading. Yeah, it's a decree from the Bible, we'll call it, to read, or a commandment from the Bible to read Megillah on Purim. But the rabbis, just as they can tell you refrain from blowing a shofar and taking a lulav on Shabbos, they also said refrain from taking Megillah, reading Megillah on Shabbos. So therefore, we can't read Megillah on Shabbos. That's the explanation for the Mishnah. Rav Yosef says a different reason. Why aren't we reading Megillah on Shabbos? Very important. Because the poor people, they're waiting for the Megillah reading. They're coming to collect in the gathering of the Megillah reading. And since the Matanot Le'Evyonim is attached to the Megillah reading, and one cannot give on Shabbos, therefore the Megillah reading cannot be on Shabbos. So it's 2 reasons. Machlokas of Rabbi and Rav Yosef, why aren't we reading Megillah on Shabbos? Is it because of the concern of carrying the Megillah on Shabbos? Or is it because we must attach the Matanot Le'Evyonim, the gifts to the poor, on Shabbos, because to the Megillah, and therefore Megillah cannot be read on Shabbos? The Gemara continues. There is a Breita saying, even though it was said that the little towns, okay, the Gemara corrects itself. Because it was said that the little towns are earlying the Megillah reading to Mondays and Thursdays, then also we collect in that day and we give the Matanot Le'Evyonim that day, because the eyes of the Aniyim are they're expecting, they're looking up to the Megillah reading. So we see that the Gemara supports Rav Yosef's reasoning that the Megillah should always be read when the money is collected for the Evyonim. And therefore, let's say in the small towns, that you read Megillah before Purim, so Matanot L'Evyonim will be given before Purim, at the same time of reading the Megillah. This is like a package deal. And therefore, you can't read Megillah on Shabbos. And therefore, the Jerusalem people are earlying their Megillah reading to Friday this year. Aval, the Gemara continues, Aval, simcha ina noheget ela bizmana. Look at that, a very, very critical and important clause here in the Gemara, in the beginning of Hey Amud Aleph. However, after all this has been said and done, that you should early Megillah reading sometimes, and you should early the Matanot L'Evyonim sometimes. However, the Simcha of Purim is not practiced only at its time. Now, this clause, it's not that clear whether it only refers to the end. The million-dollar question in understanding this Gemara that Rishonim and Achronim were arguing about, whether this clause, however, the Simcha of Purim, which probably implies the Seudat Purim, Yemei Mishta v'Simcha. Simchas Purim is practiced only at its time. It's not being earlied. Is it referring only to the last case in the Gemara, which is the small towns? The small towns, it was said that they're earlying their Megillah reading, as the Mishnah says, and therefore, consequently, they're earlying their Matanot L'Evyonim. The question is, then they're stressing these small towns, the Simcha should be practiced still only at its time. Or it talks also regarding the Jerusalem people, because the Jerusalem people was said that when Shushan Purim is on Shabbos, so you early the Megillah. So it says, however, this Simcha should be practiced on its time. If I read it this way, that this clause includes and talks both about the little towns and about Jerusalem, then I learn from here two things. A, that the Megillah reading in Yudalid that we're doing next week, next Friday, is considered by the Gemara as not Bismana, because for us Jerusalem people, it's not Bismana. It's just like little towns reading in Yud Bet. But more important, it implies that the Sudat Purim should be practiced on Shabbos. Okay, next sentence here. Amarav, Megillah Bismana Korino Ta'afilu B'Yachid. Shelo Bismana B'Asara. Megillah in its time, if you read it in its proper time, meaning Jerusalem in the 14th for all the world, then you read it with a bracha, even when you read it alone. If you read it not in its time, meaning you earlied it because you're a small town that reads it on a Monday and a Thursday, meaning on even in Yud Bet or Yud Gimel, then you must have a quorum of a minyan, pursuing Nisa, to read the Megillah. Ravasi says, Bein Bismana, Bein Shelo Bismana Basra. You always require 10 people for reading the Megillah. As you know, we are not ruling B'diavad like Ravasi. We're definitely enabling to read Megillah with a bracha, even individually. You know, people wake up, people miss Megillah readings, and then they hear Megillah readings and with a blessing. Okay. Now, let's understand the main points of what we read here. My question is the following. What is the status of the Megillah reading for us next Friday? For us, I'm talking about Jerusalem people. Is it totally analogical, comparable to small towns reading before, in Yud Gimel Adar, in Yud Bet Adar, before Purim? Because as we know, the law of the Mishnah is that small towns are earlying their Megillah readings to the Monday or Thursday that is before Purim. So these small towns are definitely, when they're reading the Megillah, it's called Megillah Shelo Bizmana. Megillah not at its time. So regarding them, it's clear that it's said that they need a quorum of a minyan. But how do we see us reading, Jerusalem people, that because Purim was on Shabbos for us, is on Shabbos for us next week, and therefore, for some reason, either because of the concern of carrying or because we need to attach the gifts to the poor people to the Megillah reading, we're earlying the Megillah reading to Friday. Is this called Bizmana or Shelo Bizmana? Is it just like, do I see it as the same status of, yes, there is a model of reading Megillah before its time. The model is in the small towns. And this is exactly what we're applying, us Jerusalem people, next week. Or no, we see it as Megillah reading at its time. What will be the ramification? A very important ramification in Corona times. Me as a community rabbi, it's the first thing that I thought about. If I view this as totally analogical to the early towns earlying the Megillah reading to a Monday or Thursday, meaning Megillah reading prior to Purim, and that's how I see our Megillah reading next Friday, yeah, as a Megillah reading prior to our Purim, because our Purim is on Shabbos. So maybe we must read Megillah with a minyan, and anyone who reads the Megillah cannot make a bracha on it. Now in Corona times, that's a big time question, because I'm sure that next Friday, there will be some people that won't be able to make it to a minyan. People in quarantine, people that are Corona, that are positive for Corona, they will want to read Megillah next Friday, and they're living in Jerusalem, and located in Jerusalem. They will want to read the Megillah. However, if this is considered Shelo Bizmana, then without a minyan, they cannot make a bracha. So what do you say? Is it considered reading in time, or is it considered reading prior to its time, just like the little towns when they read on a Monday or a Thursday that is before Purim, before the 14th, it's considered Megillah Shelo Bizmana, not at its time, and therefore they can't make a bracha. What do you guys say? Yes, Paul. Yeah.
You raised the issue whether we use Yemei Purim, and yet the halakha is Bo Bayom. So is Bo Bayom on both days, okay, or is it on one day? That's I would say if we go according to the idea of Yemei Purim is one unit, then it doesn't make any difference whether you read it on Friday or Shabbat. On the other hand, I've got another question. A Brit, you don't postpone on Shabbat, and you don't have the shikulim of whether you're carrying the kelim for the Brit or the sudat for Brit Milah, but you make it on Shabbat. So why can't we read the Megillah on Shabbat? What's the pasul?
Well, Paul, I don't want to go into the issue of bris, because bris is a total different topic. It says by Yom HaShmini, and there's a big stress on a Yom HaShmini. Your question is not strong about Megillah. Your question is strong about shofar. Shofar is the right, and you cancel all the mitzvah the right of shofar, and you see that you do cancel it. So Megillah has a very good model, lulav and shofar. So the brit is the exception. At any rate, regarding the first point, as Paul said, that's exactly here. That's exactly here the point. Yeah. The question whether I see the analogy, whether the status of someone reading Megillah before the 14th, because it's a small town, is it exactly the same when we read the Megillah on the 14th? Instead of the 15th, is dependent on two questions. Okay, one is what Paul said, our discussion. Do I see Yemei HaPurim, meaning when a Jerusalem person is reading a Megillah in the 14th, is it considered reading at time or not at time? One can say, even though all year round, he won't be Yotze, all years round, all regular years, he won't be Yotze his obligation of Megillah reading if he'll read in the 14th. No, because there the rabbis insisted that the people outside of Jerusalem are doing all their practices on the 14th, and the people in Jerusalem are doing all their practices in the 15th. And yet still, he has a status of Yemei Purim. So therefore, in this year, because of considerations, when he reads it in the 14th, he read it on time. Therefore, there's no need for a minyan, okay? That is one option. Also, it might be depended on the reasons brought in the Gemara for not reading the Megillah on Shabbos and reading it on the 14th. If I say that it's because of the concern of carrying 4 amos, that I won't carry, then I might say that when I read the Megillah on the 14th as a Jerusalem person, because of this consideration, it's merely a rabbinic thing. It's not the full decree of Megillah reading, just like every year. I could say that it's not bismana. However, if I say that it's because of the consideration of Rav Yosef in Hameshulash Nesuot L'Mikra Megillah, then it is very plausible to say that that was the original takana of the Anshe Knesset Agdola that decreed the Megillah, that when Megillah falls on Shabbos, because it's attached to Matanot Le'Evyonim, therefore, the time of Megillah reading for Jerusalem people will be in the 14th, okay? By the way, the difference between the two is that according to what I just said now, I'll say that it's the time for Megillah reading, and therefore I don't need a minyan. However, it's still not necessarily considered the Purim. The Purim is really Shabbos. Now, let's now zoom some Koros here. Rashi says, okay, we'll skip Rashi. Oh, now, of course, the question is, why don't we read the Megillah? Why don't we read the Megillah on Sunday? Okay, there were reasons in the Gemara not to read the Megillah on Shabbos. 2 reasons. But why not read the Megillah on Friday, on Sunday? Why not postpone it to Sunday? So the Gemara says a general thing. Ema shitzar v'shibzar. Why there are no Megillah readings whatsoever in the 16th of Nisan? Velo ya'avor ktiv. There is a pasuk in the Megillah says lekayem et yemei hapurim ha'ele, to establish these days of Purim. Velo ya'avor, and they should not pass. So therefore, there is a max of reading Megillah. Yeah, you must read the Megillah no later than the 15th. So if no later than the 15th, and if you can't read the Megillah on Shabbos, so the outcome is that you must read the Megillah on Friday. Now, of course, there is another reason, at least according to one of our conceptualization, it will make sense to read the Megillah in Yemei HaPurim. So it's better to read it on a Friday than on a Sunday. So not only because of the Lo Yavor, but also because it's Yemei HaPurim. But this is, of course, dependent whether we agree with this conceptualization of Rav Soloveitchik, or we disagree with it and just say, no. There's no concept of Yemei HaPurim. Purim for the people outside of Jerusalem is 14th. Purim for the people in Jerusalem is the 15th. Then the only reason why not to read it on Sunday is what the Gemara says, Velo Yavor. Now there is a giant, the Shagasaria, that wrote a book on Masechet Megillah called Turei Even, and he says the following: Bekasheli, Ateinach larava de mefarish dahainu tam adein korin Megillah b'shab mishum shema yavir. Ika lemeimer chacham machronin tiknu bechol bechal b'shabbat lakdim le'erev Shabbat. He says, according to Rabbi, the case is that the later rabbis decreed to early the Megillah reading to a Friday. Meaning, there are the people of the Great Assembly. They're already in the Bible even. They established to read the Megillah for Jerusalem people in a year like ours on Friday. Excuse me. Again. The people of the Great Assembly, they generally speaking, the people of the Great Assembly, they decreed that every year we should read Megillah. Meaning, what is the validity, what is the intensity of the chiyuv to read Megillah? I'm now talking generally. It's not d'oraita. However, as I said, it's stronger than rabbinic. It's divrei Kabbalah. It's the people of the Great Assembly. They established it. Now comes the Torah Even and says, according to Rabbi's consideration, that the reason we early it is because of the concern of carrying. That's why we read it. We Jerusalem people, next year read it on Friday. So he says, these are later rabbis that made that decree. Okay. But according to Rav Yosef, that says that the reason why we don't read the Megillah on Shabbos is because of the attachment of the Matanot La'avyonim to Mikra Megillah. Bal Korcha, Anshei Knesset Agdola Atzman Tiknu Lahakdim. Then the fact that we read next week on Friday is out of the original decree of the people of the Great Assembly. So there will be a great ramification as to when we read Megillah next week as Jerusalem people. Do we read it like every year in terms of it has the status of a mitzvah from the prophets, of a mitzvah of the Great Assembly, or no, it's merely rabbinic? I'll give you the analogy. This year, I believe Rosh Hashanah was on Shabbos, the first day, or whenever. There are years that Rosh Hashanah's first day is on Shabbos. In that year, in such a year that Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos, then the only shofar blowing that we do is on the second day, on Sunday, and it's only rabbinic in status. You missed the entire d'oraita positive commandment of blowing shofar. That's the way it is. The rabbis have the power to do such a thing. So maybe the same thing happens for us, Jerusalem people, this year. That the only level of Megillah reading that we do this year is a rabbinic and not the regular level of Megillah reading of performing a decree of the prophets. So the outcome will be fascinating. I have a friend in Rehovot and myself. We both read Megillah at the same time this year on empty stomach, both of us. However, he's fulfilling a commandment that has a status of a commandment of the Great Assembly of the prophets, and I'm merely fulfilling a rabbinic decree, a rabbinic commandment. I missed the opportunity this year to perform a Megillah reading in the level of a Great Assembly chiyuv, just like I missed the opportunity to blow the shofar on the d'oraita level. So that is one option. However, says the Torah Even, if the reason is not that, if the reason that I'm reading Megillah on Friday and not on Shabbos is because that I must attach the Matanot La'avyonim to the Megillah reading, so that must be the original decree of how Megillah reading and Matanot La'avyonim, which are the mitzvos of the day, how they're done. So that must be part of the original decree of the Great Assembly of the prophets, that Jerusalem people on Shabbos, when the 15th is on Shabbos, they read the Megillah on Friday. And then I will perform the same level of mitzvah, just like the person outside of Jerusalem. Also, probably this will be considered reading Megillah in its time. So the ramification is very simple. Let's say I have a friend that lives in Rehovot. He celebrated, Thursday night he was in Rehovot. He woke up in the morning in Rehovot, but he didn't have the time to read the Megillah. and he drove to Jerusalem. Now he comes to a shul in Jerusalem, and he wants to be Yotzeh, his chiyuv in Kriyas Megillah. Is it okay? Is it okay that a Jerusalem laner will fulfill the obligation for a person outside of Jerusalem this year on a Friday? Actually, the Jerusalem person is reading the bracha in shul because for us this year, we are all Jerusalem people. We're reading the Megillah on Friday. So we're reading on Friday. Person from Rehovot is obligated to read on Friday. So why not? I will be Yotzeh in my reading. But that is dependent on what we said. If there is a difference in the level of the chiyuv, because he has a chiyuv from the Great Assembly, and I this year have merely a chiyuv that is rabbinic because of the decree not to carry dalad amot, so it was removed from its original day, and now the status is merely rabbinic, then I'm not able to fulfill his obligation. However, if both of us have the status of Divrei Kabbalah also this year, then I can fulfill his obligation, okay? So halacha l'maisa, it's a suffix, it's better not to rely on this, okay? The ramification that Torah Yevon himself gives is fascinating. It's regarding women. The Torah Yevon says, here, let's see it inside. The Torah Yevon says, usually he says, some hold that women cannot fulfill the obligation of men, even though they're chayiv, because their chiyuv is merely rabbinic, according to some views, and the male's chiyuv is from the Great Assembly. By the way, not everyone agrees with it. Many say that the chiyuv of the women all years round is exactly identical to the level of the chiyuv of males. But there is an opinion that nashim are chayiv only rabbinic, that afhein ayu botonas is merely a rabbinic consideration. So usually, according to that view, they can't fulfill the obligation for men. However, if you're in Jerusalem, says this year, specifically this year, then since the male's chiyuv, according to one of the views, is merely rabbinic, so here a lady could fulfill your obligation. Okay, very good. So here, as you see, Rabbi here asked the question that we asked before, whether the person from Jerusalem can fulfill the obligation for a person outside of Jerusalem this coming Friday, not this coming, next Friday. And also he says, Yadua ma shedanu gdolei hador, imutar lemukaf linsua la'arei haprazot be'erev Shabbos b'shana zo. Yeah, that will be another question. If the Gdolei Hador were saying, I'm a Jerusalem person, now I want to drive and make Shabbos outside of Jerusalem, next Shabbos. Am I allowed to do so? Because maybe I need to be in the morning of the 15th, I need to be in Jerusalem. Because if I was in the morning of the 14th outside in Jerusalem, then it wasn't Purim for me, even though I read the Megillah. And then when I'm outside of Jerusalem in the morning of the 15th, I missed all the Purims. However, if I say that the 14th is considered a Purim, even for the Jerusalem people, then I'm able to drive. Okay, so as I said, the most pressing discussion for us in Corona times is whether I'm able to read it without a minyan or not. So let's see the opinions here. The Rishalmi here says, Amarav Chad Tanyahu mipnei amru chaliot lekrachin b'shabbat korim be'erev Shabbos. Why was it said that you're earlying it to Friday if you're a Jerusalem person this year? The Amar B'chelbo hakol yotzin the Yudalet shuzman kriyata. Everyone fulfills b'diavad their obligation in 14th because it's man kriyata. So here we have a clear-cut answer to our chakira, whether the 14th is considered reading at its time or not. Okay, we see that at least the Jerusalem Talmud clearly says that b'diavad everyone is yotzeh in the 14th. Yeah, perhaps he even says it every year, but he says, at least this year, this is the time of the reading. Now, let's look at this fundamental Mishnah Berurah. He says, O the mitrami yom tetvav b'Shabbat, etzrachina mukafim lakdim likroto be'erev Shabbos, bevadai tzarich lekabetz asara l'kriyato. He says, you must have 10. Uvazeh od chamir yoter, the leika asara lo yavarchu amukafin aleh. Very strict. He says, next Friday, if you read the Megillah individually without a quorum of the minyan, you can't make a bracha. And as I said, that is a very, very big thing for us in Corona times, because here the scenario will be that there will be many people that will read without a minyan. And it says here, the Mishnah Berurah holds they cannot make a bracha. That's his opinion. Why? Because it's considered reading Megillah not at its time. The Shara Tzion, which is the Mishnah Berurah himself, elaborates, Tama kriya below bracha. Why are we reading without a bracha? And by the way, the Mishnah Berurah, also the Luach of Tukachinsky agrees with him. That's what I saw this morning, and the Pri Chadash and all others. Tama kriya below bracha, because this is dependent on the opinions of the Rishonim, whether you read whether the fact that you need 10, if it's not in its time, is it merely lechatchila or leikuva? There are Rishonim that says that it's merely lechatchila, and then he says, Rashi says that it's merely lechatchila, therefore you should read it without a bracha. Then I saw that the Pri Chadash says also, he says, why do I say to read it? Why won't I say that individual people should just not read? Because there are opinions that it's okay to read, even not at its time, without a minyan. However, don't make a bracha. So is that the ruling? So here I'll tell you, no. Halacha l'maaseh, I as a community rabbi, based on Reb Chaim Sonnenfeld, based on the Chazon Ish, based on the rabbis of the Minhag of Yerushalayim, as was given to us, is that we all make a bracha, and those who are in quarantine, and those who are, that will be ill the next week and will read the Megillah for themselves from a kosher Megillah, they will make a bracha, even if there is no minyan. Unlike this Mishnah Berurah. What is that? Let's just see it inside. Rav Asher writes, V'ineh Chazon Ish nakat, the Chazon Ish holds that it is considered reading at its time. And that's what's written, and that's the reason of Rav Sonnenfeld. And they have also a reason, because all the reason that there is a need for 10 not at its time, it's because of Pirsum Nisa, because it's only, you see it only as sporadic individuals that early it, let's say, to the Monday or Thursday before. It's not a big public. However, when the 15th is on Shabbos, everyone, all the Jews are reading it in Yudalit, so there is a fantastic Pirsum Nisa, so in such a case, you read it individually. By the way, this is a certain local reason for Megillah reading. But according to what I said, there is another reason why to consider it reading Megillah Bismana, because this reason always says that it's a Megillah reading in Bismana. Okay? What he's bringing here in the name of the Chazon. Yemei HaPurim is to say that it's not only Megillah Bismana, it's even a day of Purim Bismana, and consequently Megillah reading Bismana. However, using this reason or that reason, a blessing should be made, even if you read individually, even if you're a Jerusalem person reading next week the Megillah individually. Now the next question is, let's see some other laws aside from Megillah reading. Aside from Megillah reading, so we established Megillah reading is read on Friday, and we saw in the beginning, in the first source of the Gemara, that there is a Purim, or the main Purim is on Shabbos. So if it's not regarding Megillah reading, what is it about? So let's see the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch rules the following. Yom Chamisha Asar Shechal Yot B'Shabbat, Ein Korin a Megillah B'Shabbos. The 15th that is on Shabbos, you don't read the Megillah on Shabbos. Rather, you're earlying it to read it in Erev Shabbos. Okay, this is what we saw till now. And you give the gifts to the poor also on Friday. This we also saw that Megillah reading and Matanot Le'Evyonim is a package deal. Uveyom Shabbat motzi'in shnei sfarim. What is happening on Shabbos? We will read Parshat Tetzaveh, and the second book we will read Vayavo Amalek, the laying for poor. This is what we'll do in Jerusalem. Outside of Jerusalem, of course, they laid already Vayavo Amalek on Friday. On Shabbos, they were just read Parshat Tetzaveh. By the way, which Haftarah will we say on Shabbat of Purim? Surprise, surprise, we'll say the Haftarah of Shabbos Zachor again. It's a very unique thing. 2 Shabbosim in a row, we will say the same Haftarah. However, the people outside of Jerusalem, they will say the regular Tetzaveh Haftarah. At any rate, we see the Shulchan Aruch saying, okay, when the 15th is on Shabbos, Megillah reading is on Friday, Matanot Le'Evyonim is on Friday. On Shabbos, you read the Purim laning, the Omrim Alanisim, and you recite Alanisim in your davening. That's what we'll all do next Shabbos. Next Shabbos, we will do the Purim laning, and we'll say Alanisim. Because it's Purim. The 15th is Purim. Ve'ein osim seudas Purim ad yom echad b'Shabbos. However, the meal, the Mishnah, the Simcha is done only on Sunday. This is why we call it. That's why we call it Purim Hameshulash. You see, this is the Shulchan Aruch of Purim Hameshulash. Why Meshulash? Split to 3. Megillah reading Friday, Matanot Le'Evyonim Friday, laning and Alanisim Shabbos, Sudas Purim Sunday. Why Sudas Purim Sunday and not Friday or not Shabbos? Why Sudas Purim not Shabbos? Of course, that's a big question. But I have before that another question. Or you know what? Forget about the other question. What is the mitzvah that is missing here from the Shulchan Aruch? Matanot Le'Evyonim is mentioned here. Laning, Megillah, Alanisim, Suda. What mitzvah is not mentioned here in the Shulchan Aruch?
Getting drunk.
Mishloach Manos. Harold said Mishloach Manos. Mishloach Manos is not mentioned. Anyone has an idea why Shalach Manos is not mentioned? Well, the simple explanation of the Mishnah Brura for this omission of the Mishloach Manos, and that's is the following. He says it's pashut that the Shalach Manos is done on Shabbos just like the Suda. The minute the Shulchan Aruch mentioned the Suda is on Sunday, he already addressed Shalach Manos. Well, that is, of course, there's an underlying assumption that the nature of the chiyuv of Shalach Manos is that it has an attachment to the meal. We can ask, what is the relationship between Shalach Manos? And now I'm asking all years round, how do I conceptualize Shalach Manos? How do I conceptualize Matanos Le'Evyonim? What is the link between the two? What is the link between Shalach Manos and the Suda? So let's first start with Shalach Manos. It seems clear from the sources that Shalach Manos is attached to the Suda. It's an extension of the Chiyuv, or it's part of the Chiyuv of Mishnah V'Simcha. Look at the Rambam. Keitzad Chova Suda Zo. Keitzad Chova Suda Zo. Sheyochal Basar v'yitaken Suda na kafi asher timtza yado v'shot yain ad sheyistaker v'yardem b'shikruto v'chen chayav adam lishloach shtei manot basar shtei minei tavshil o shtei minei ochlin l'chaveiro shnam mishmach manot ish l'reo shtei manot leish echad. The Rambam, actually based on a story of the Gemara, the two Amoraim performed their obligation of Shalach Manos by exchanging meals. But the Rambam understood from this Gemara that the Shalach Manos, it seems from the simple wordings of the Rambam that he includes it in the same halacha, that Shalach Manos is participation in the meal. Matanot La'avyonim, he already lists in the next halacha, in a separate halacha. The one who says it clearly is Trumat Hadeshin, one of the Rishonim. He's asked, people were asking their friends, clothes, sheets, are yotze, if they're sending items that are not food, are they performing their obligation? It seems that they're not yotze. Because the reason for Shalach Manos is that everyone will have enough to do the Suda, enhancing the Sehuda, participation in the Suda. Alma detada mishum Seuda. That's the Trumat Hadeshin. According to this view, it's very clear why the Shulchan Aruch omitted the discussion about the Shalach Manos, because the minute that he says that the Suda is on Sunday for some reason, then the Shalach Manos is on Sunday too. However, the author of Lachadodi, Rabbi Shlomo Lekabetz, in his book Manot HaLevi, he says a different reason for Shalach Manos. Umishloach manot ki zer omez ki hem ba'aguda achat u'be'ava ve'achva. It's in order to unite the people. At the time of Shalach Manos. Moshe Weiss claims that the Manot HaLevi is not actually arguing with Trumat Hadeshin, he only adds upon him. Some, however, understood that he argues. Now, the Chazon Ish has a unique opinion here. The Chazon Ish holds that the Shulchan Aruch omitted Shalach Manos, because Shalach Manos is not attached to the Seuda, meaning on Sunday. Shalach Manos is attached to Matanot La'avyonim. Both of them are mitzvahs of simcha and uniting people. So if the Matanot La'avyonim is on Friday, so the Shalach Manos is also on Friday. But that's a unique opinion of the Chazon Ish. Most hold like the Mishnah Berurah, and that's how we do. Suda is on Sunday, Shalach Manos is also on Sunday. Now what's left for our question, for our shiur, is why the Suda is on Sunday? Why isn't it on Shabbos? Purim is on Shabbos. Why isn't it on Shabbos, or at least early it, like Megillah? It was said V'lo Ya'avor. So obviously the Ran explains that V'lo Ya'avor is referring only to Megillah, according to this view, and not to the Suda. The reason is the Yerushalmi, that the Rif rules halacha l'maaseh. Yerushalmi says, Be'elu amru makdimin v'lo me'achrin, kriyat Megillah, utrumat shkalim, makdimin v'lo me'achrin, sudas Rosh Chodesh v'sudas Purim, me'achrin v'lo makdimin. And why that? V'yasu otam b'Shabbos. Why not have the meal on Shabbos? Amar lo la'asot otam yemei mishteh v'simcha. Et shesimchato tluya bebeit din. Yatsa zeh shesimchato tluya b'shamayim. The Yerushalmi is a little vague, but the Yerushalmi says that the simcha of Shabbos is dependent on heaven. Heaven decided the seventh day, and the Suda of Purim must be done in a day that is dependent on Beit Din, on Kiddush HaChodesh. Simcha is, the Simcha of Purim and of Rosh Chodesh is something that is decreed by Beit Din, and therefore you can't do it in a day of a Simcha that is done by Shabbos. By the way, here I presented the view that the problem is to do the Sudas Purim. Soloveitchik has an analysis, and he says maybe the problem is to spoil the Simcha of Shabbos with this. This could be a very important ramification to this, and we'll end the shiur with that. Look at the Mishnah Berurah here. V'nei ma'aral chaviv, herich lo chiach, the Bavli shalanu eino sover ken. I read this ma'aral chaviv. V'da'ato sha'seuda hi b'Shabbat. V'asa ken ma'aseh b'Yerushalayim. V'gam mishloach manot b'Shabbat. Ki hamanot hem ma'aseuda. V'aradvas pasak ha'shulchan aruch v'chen ha'magen Avraham. The Mari ibn Chaviv the Gemara that we learned in the beginning of the shir, here, this clause that I told you that it's $1 million clause, Aval simcha eina noheget ela bizmana. If this sentence refers to Jerusalem this year, then the Suda should be done on Shabbos, according to the Babli. Consequently, the Mari ibn Chaviv understood that there is a machloket Bavli and Yerushalmi on the matter, whether we postpone the Suda to a Sunday or we must do it on Shabbos. And therefore, he did it on Shabbos, and he did Shalach Manos on Shabbos. Now, the Meiri said you can't do Shalach Manos on Shabbos, the Meiri. And therefore, the Meiri says, here, look, it said, Umikol makom yesh mefarshim shemachar shemakdimin bekriyat Megillah kmo shebe'arnu, af hem makdimin besimcha. So we have your third opinion. V'od sharei mishloach manot haya nidcha. Yeah. So according to the Meiri brings an opinion, brought in the Ran too, that actually the Suda is done on Friday with the Megillah. So we have all three options. Some Rishonim say you do it on Friday. Some Rishonim say you do the Suda on Shabbos. Some Rishonim say you do the Suda on Sunday. Halacha l'maisa, we're ruling to do the Suda on Sunday. That's what we do, halacha l'maisa, and the Shalach Manos. However, the Pri Chadash says, and the Mishnah Berurah brings him here, that the Mishnah Berurah says here, V'akatav, okay, V'apri Chadash in the Metzadet, Shiyasu Suda b'Shabbat, v'gam b'yom aleph, v'chen ha'mishloach manot b'shteihem. The Chumrah of the Pri Chadash, and many are doing this, that on Shabbos, you add something a little bit, you do a greater Suda on Shabbos, so that you do also a Sudas Purim on Shabbos, and that you also give a Shalach Manos on Shabbos. The Pri Chadash says to do that. Soloveitchik was concerned with this Chumrah of the Pri Chadash. He said perhaps the Yerushalmi says that one, you can't confuse the Simcha of that is from heaven, of Shabbos, with the Simcha that is dependent on Beit Din, and therefore you can't spoil the Simcha of Shabbos. Meaning, what is the focus here? That I can't do a Suda in a day of Shabbos because a Suda's Purim requires to do it in a day dependent on Beit Din? Or no, the problem is that you can't spoil a Simcha of Shamayim with a Simcha that is dependent totally on Beit Din. Depending on this, we'll see if there's any point with the Chumrah of the Pri Chadash to do the Suda also on Shabbos. In sum, what we've seen here, Purim Hameshulash. There are two ways to view this concept of Purim Hameshulash. One way is to say that actually the day is really split to three. Actually, the day is split to three, and there is a sense of Purim in all of these 3 days, especially, at least on a Friday, it's considered Yemei HaPurim, and it's considered Bismana. Another view was, no, Purim is merely on Shabbos. For technical reasons, we early the Megillah to Friday. For technical reasons, we postpone the Suda to Sunday. Okay? Ramifications. Can a Jerusalem person fulfill an obligation for a non-Jerusalem person in reading Megillah on a Friday, depending on the status of my chiva of reading Megillah next Friday? Okay? That is a ramification. Ramification regarding the status of a Sunday is just a Tashlumin Suda, because we couldn't do it on Shabbos, so it's merely a Tashlumin Suda, or no, it's mamash a celebration of Purim, because if I do this celebration of Purim after the day of the Chiyuv, meaning the 15th, it's a celebration of Purim, then ramification will be the Avelus, as I said in the beginning of the class. Halacha l'maisa, we read the Megillah on Friday, we say Al Anisim and Laning on Shabbos, Haftarah of Zachor on Shabbos, and also Shabbos, Suda on Sunday and Shalach Manos on Sunday. It's good to also do Suda on Shabbos and do give one Shalach Manos or something on Shabbos. Even the Rav Soloveitchik has some reservation from that Chumrah. And of course, if you want to be outside the Rishonim that are saying Suda on Friday, then no problem. Celebrate a little bit on Friday too, and have a little Suda on Friday too. Purim Sameach to everybody, and of course, reading the Megillah on Friday. We rule, even though when Mishnah Berurah says the opposite, we rule that you make a bracha even if you read Beit. Yes, Harold.
Okay, so the logic of the Yerushalmi somehow I think is a little questionable because they're talking about Simcha of Shabbos, and it seems that the major characteristic of Shabbos is not Simcha, it's Oneg, and Simcha obviously is a Chag characteristic, and there's a question about Simcha on Shabbos. So to say that the Simcha of Purim would confuse or decrease or diminish the Simcha of Shabbos, well, there's not such an Indian of Simcha.
Right. So that is Aaron. That is against the way Rav Soloveitchik understood this Gemara, and I agree. I think the simple way of understanding the Yerushalmi is the opposite. That Sudas Purim, in its nature, should be done in a day that is not decreed, that is not by Shemayim, but by Beidin. And Simcha, when they attribute here, and the Yerushalmi does attribute here Simcha to Shabbos, which is, you're right, it's a little surprising. There is a meal, and the meal, Tachlis, is Simcha, yeah, and because the performance of Simcha of Purim is by meal, so they're saying don't confuse this action of Simcha with this action of Simcha. This action of Simcha stems from Shemayim, the mitzvah of Oneg, because that's Shabbos, and you can't confuse that Simcha with that Simcha. That's the Yerushalmi. I was asked here a question. I'll just say, reading the Zachor, I want to clarify. It involves carrying, Larry. Yeah, but if you have an Erev, it's not a problem. So what do I care that it involves carrying? At any rate, regarding the question of Zachor, no, I don't want any confusion. Shmuel's opinion was that we read Zachor next week's Shabbos, but we don't rule like Shmuel. We're reading Zachor only this Shabbos. What I said is that we're not reading Zachor next Shabbos. We're reading Vayavu Amalek here in Jerusalem, Purim Laning, but we're reading what's unique. We're reading the Haftarah of Zachor. The Haftarah of Zachor is read twice. It's read this coming Shabbos, and it's read next Shabbat. And what's the logic in this? Because it's a suitable Haftarah for Purim. Here you have the case of Haftarah on Purim, and that's the best Haftarah for Purim, Zachor, okay? And Mechiyat Amalek, okay. The Zechira and the Asiyah are done together. Usually the Zechira precedes the Asiyah. Here, the Zechira and the Asiyah are also done together. Okay, Chavim,
can I ask you one quick question?
Yes.
About, obviously, like it's kind of in Yerushalayim, it's going to feel like a 3-day Chag. Is there any halachic problem of raising the status of the Sudot, both on a Friday and on Shabbat, and making them kind of more Purim-y? Because the Ramah says usually in the evening of Purim, there's a mitzvah to have a small Suda. And I think Rav Soloveitchik also said the same in the evening because the Suda is supposed to be connected to the Megillah itself. So there is an inyan already in halacha of raising the status of even Sudot which aren't the actual Purim Suda. So is there a problem in raising the Friday and Shabbos meals a bit to make it more Purim-y?
Did you ever see Jews rejecting a chumrah to enlarge a Suda in some days?
Right, that's why I'm asking. We're great, especially, thank God, most of us have been...
Benji, but unfortunately, maybe I wasn't clear or you missed something. First of all, I said that the Pri Chadash is saying clearly that one should do, that the Mishnah Berurah says that one should, quotes the Pri Chadash, that even though we rule like the Shulchan Aruch to do the Suda on Sunday, one should also upgrade his Suda on Shabbos.
Right.
We saw that. We read it together.
Yeah, I know. What's the Pesach though? I'm asking, what's the actual Pesach rather than just the Pri Chadash?
Well, that's what the Mishnah Berurah says. I mentioned that Rav Soloveitchik said that maybe according to some understanding of the Yerushalmi, there is a reservation from that. But we don't hold like this, Rav Soloveitchik. This is just the pilpul.
Right. And on Friday as well?
Friday, yeah, because there are opinions of the Meiri. There are opinion brought in the Meiri and the Ran that the Suda is on Friday. So why not?
Great.
it's not, why not? Though I must say that the Mishnah Berurah doesn't rule it. Not that he has a reservation from it. You see, that is a less dominant opinion, Sudan on Friday. The dominant opinions are Sunday, Shulchan Aruch, of course, what we rule, and Shabbos, okay? The early, the Suda to Friday is less of a dominant opinion.
But it makes sense it makes sense to make a bigger surah on Friday too, because obviously that's the story of the Megillah when we're reading it.
Yeah, but if it's not the day of Purim, if it's Megillah Shalom Bismana, as we mentioned, according to some poskim and the way the Mishnah Berurah holds, then this falls down. Okay.
Good, thanks a lot.
Is there an inyan of listening to Megillah via Zoom?
No, listening to Megillah of Zoom is a different, it's not our shir now, okay? It's that's why I didn't want even to confront it. But since you mentioned it, so it's preferable not to. It's preferable that, let's say, when you follow by the Zoom, have a kosher Megillah in your hands and read it yourself with it. However, B'diavad, we can rely on the opinions that you are Yotze by Zoom. If there's no such thing, then you could rely on it. Okay.